Hey everybody, welcome back to the Innovation Storytellers Show. Today we are going to go nuclear. And if you've been really into watching Oppenheimer recently, or Barbenheimer, if you will, we are going to be talking about innovations in the world of nuclear energy. And I think it's going to be a phenomenal conversation. I have with me, my guest today is Heather Feldman, who is the Director of Training and Development at EPRI. And in this role, Heather leads EPRI's efforts to apply the science of learning to develop and deliver modern training programs that really meet the needs of the energy workforce and the public. At EPRI, Feldman previously led teams that conducted applied R&D to overcome barriers for modernizing and maximizing the utilization of nuclear power plants. She's developed new and enhanced technologies for processes for inspection and repair and aging management of nuclear power plants. And she's also deployed advanced nuclear technologies in this industry. So she's led EPRI's initiative on artificial intelligence, managed the engineering programs area, and worked in the steam generator management program, as well as the Office of Innovation. So you're really getting a lot of knowledge today from Heather in so many different areas of this work. And before joining EPRI, Heather worked for the United Space Alliance, where she coordinated systems engineering and integration work in the thermal area of the space shuttle program. Her work also contributed to the successful return to flight mission after the Columbia accident. So, very powerful discussion today. I hope you'll join me in learning more about nuclear energy and how it's impacting you. So, Heather, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited for our conversation.
So let's start from the start. How did you even walk into this door? I mean, whether it's on the space in the space program or coming to nuclear energy, what was that driving force for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it really starts back when I was in school. So I was studying to be a mechanical engineer, trying to figure out what I wanted to do for a research project when I was in graduate school. And I had the opportunity to, for my master's thesis, do some laboratory type research. And I really wanted to work with a industry sponsor for my PhD work. And Westinghouse Nuclear Fuel was doing some research with Clemson University. And I thought it was very interesting research. It was well aligned with my particular interest in mechanical engineering. And it was nuclear energy, which when I think about that and the value that energy provides to society and the value that nuclear energy provides, I thought this is a really good fit for me. So got into the nuclear energy area when I was in college, and after college went and worked on the space shuttle program, which was very interesting. And at a time where the Columbia accident had just happened, and I personally can remember where I was when that happened, and just the sadness.
Where were you?
I was still in graduate school at Clemson, just in my apartment, and it happened. And I just remember watching the TV, just feeling this sense of emptiness. So being able to go and work on the space shuttle program was just an amazing, amazing opportunity, and had a great couple of years working there, and then got interested in going back into energy and found my way to EPRI. And I started out in our Office of Innovation, and innovation and teaching or learning have been the themes throughout my career. So I started out in our Office of Innovation, spent about a year there, intentionally in a rotation program, but always connected to our nuclear sector. So I did some scouting. I was trying to identify technologies that could be deployed in nuclear energy, and then moved into the nuclear sector. And as you mentioned, worked a lot in a particular component in a nuclear power plant called a steam generator. And then from there, was very interested in what is some research that we could do that's innovative. It could be process innovation, it could be technology innovation that can really help and advance what we're doing in this area. So worked my way through different roles and different opportunities in the sector. And then a couple of years ago, found my way into training and development. So as a graduate student, I was very interested in teaching and had the opportunity to teach a couple of undergraduate courses. And now I'm back in a space where we're teaching and learning and training other people. Doing that knowledge transfer is important as well. So in that area, there's a lot of innovation happening. There's recent research on how we learn. And there's a movement towards creating active learner-centric learning environments. So we're doing some research in that space and looking to adapt training there as well.
It's amazing, these kinds of tragedies from space. I think we really do connect with them in a way. It feels like the most odd effort in humanity, right? To decide to make this move. And then to watch it when tragedy happens is really hard.
It's really hard. And I remember sitting in meetings where we were doing a test to understand implications of a design change. And I was sitting next to astronauts, thinking to myself, decisions that I'm making impacts that person, their family, their friends, and everybody else. And that was hugely impactful to me, and something that I've taken throughout my career, whether it's safety in the space industry, nuclear safety in a nuclear power plant, safety on a personal basis. I just connect back to that moment of sitting next to astronauts.
Yeah. I remember two things. Like I was recently giving a workshop to innovation leaders at the US Air Force, and they were putting forward new prototypes in defense and weapons and communication systems. And when I asked them what their why was, as if I would with any startup, and I said, "What's your why behind this? Why are you making this prototype?" And one of the airmen just looked me dead in the eyes and said, "To protect your life and the lives of your family." And I was like, well, that's a damn good why, as opposed to, we want to get your pizza 6 minutes faster, like
Right.
app developers that I might have met in Silicon Valley, right? Like, oh, got it. Yeah, the mission is that much more intense for everyone.
It
Yeah,
is.
those innovation decisions really matter. We're not going from warm water tide to cold water tide, right? This is life-changing stuff. So take us now into the innovation space when it comes to nuclear. I know we're all on a high from Oppenheimer or Barbenheimer, depending which one of those two movies that you love. But this is probably the closest that the American consciousness has come to nuclear power in a long time, right? We know some horrible incidents, right, that happened in the 70s, or I know I live up the river from Indian Point nuclear facility here in New York, and I went to school in Pennsylvania, so we certainly remember 3 Mile Island. And those, like, I think those are the things that kind of stick in American consciousness. But what they don't know is the day-to-day of their electricity is coming from nuclear power plants all over America and around the world. Mm-hmm.
That's right. That's right. There's a little bit over 90 nuclear plants in the United States. And those nuclear plants are the backbone that provide about 50% of our carbon-free electricity. It's about 20%.
Can we just say that one more time? Can we just say that one more time for the people in the back who didn't actually hear how important nuclear energy is to our energy safety and self-sufficiency?
Yeah, it really is about 50% of the carbon-free electricity in the United States, and it's 20% of the electricity overall in the United States.
Wow. Wow. I mean, that's just massive. And I don't think people think about a nuclear power plant as being their primary source of energy.
That's right. That's right. And I know it's amazing to me when I flip on my switch to turn on my lights that I expect electricity to be there. And you compare that with walking through a nuclear power plant or any of the generating facilities. I'll even add in wind and solar and other generating types out there, but you walk through these amazing plants and you look around. And me as a mechanical engineer student, I remember back looking at drawings and looking schematics on paper, but then seeing that in real life and seeing large pipes connected to large pieces of machinery that all operate together in a symphony and produce the electricity that we have so we can flip a light switch and our lights come on. It's truly incredible. It really is.
Yeah. So how did you get into this side of the innovation equation, working on the nuclear side of energy?
Yeah, so a few years back in the 2018 timeframe, we wanted to place more focus on innovation in nuclear energy. So here at EPRI, we formed a group that was focused on innovation in nuclear. EPRI is an organization, we're this non-for-profit organization conducting applied research and development in the energy industry. So we're already innovative. We're already doing applied research, but we wanted to have a little bit more focus. So we formed Innovation Group. And we're focused on disrupting the culture a little bit with the Innovation Group. To operate a nuclear power plant safely and reliably, it takes focus, it takes emphasis, it takes procedures, and all of that is wonderful. And then there's opportunities that come along where innovation is necessary. So you have to blend the culture of a highly reliable, regimented industry with the opportunity to innovate where you have to allow failures. And those failures need to happen in an environment where the consequences are low. And so sort of balancing between operating the plant, but also looking towards the future and looking towards potential modifications for efficiency improvements. It's kind of a balancing act. And so we were looking towards projects to really do some more thinking around how can we incorporate technologies like artificial intelligence into nuclear power plants? Where does it make sense to deploy that type of technology as an example? And we also wanted to create an environment within our own organization, within EPRI, where we could conduct research, and if it didn't work out, it was okay. Like getting the answer that, hey, this is not a good solution is actually a success. So we set up some sort of quick test projects to be able to have our employees come up with an idea, test something out real quick, either move it on to a next phase or decide that, you know what, there's nothing else here that we could do. So that's something that we did internally at EPRI. We also were working with, EPRI is a collaborative organization. So we have collaborators all around the world that we work with. And there were a handful of people that got together and were having a conversation about the nuclear industry and sort of asking themselves, what's next for nuclear needs to be more innovative. And this group of leaders got together and came up with the idea to form what is called the Global Forum for Nuclear Innovation. And so it's leaders from my organization, EPRI, from the IAEA, from the
What is that? Without getting too into the acronyms.
Yeah, let's do that. So IAEA is the International Energy Agency. They're based out of Vienna, and it's all about being a global organization looking at the peaceful use of the atom. And so we are collaborators with that organization. And then there's the OECD Nuclear Energy Agency based in Paris. So they're looking at aspects of nuclear energy from a global perspective, from an energy ministry perspective. And then there's the National Nuclear Laboratory in the United Kingdom. That was the fourth organization that we collaborated with on this Global Forum for Nuclear Innovation. And the whole idea was to take a look at how innovation and the deployment of innovation could be accelerated in an operating nuclear power plant. And coming out of that idea, we put together an event, a meeting in South Korea in June of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And the meeting that we had was not a typical conference. It was a gathering of more than 200 people from about 16 different countries to get together and really unpack and understand innovation in nuclear industry. We had participants from outside of nuclear coming and talking about, this is what we're doing when we're thinking about innovation. And one of the stories that just really sticks in my mind, and it connects back to my past and working on the space shuttle program. We had an astronaut come, and this particular person had worked at both NASA and SpaceX. And so he was able to share stories of his experience at NASA and his experience at SpaceX. And those stories really brought to life this need to fail fast when the consequences are low. This need to empower people that are early in career to come and just go do without constraints, sort of that unconstrained thinking. We also, through the several day event, we collectively put together what we thought were the top 4 innovations. And they included advanced manufacturing, artificial intelligence, those types of topic, digital twins. And we spent the next couple of years looking at those innovations at EPRI as well as organizations and really advancing them. If I look back in that time frame, a digital twin was really just like an idea, a concept, not really sure how to deploy that. And since then, we've deployed it in various types of scenarios as we look towards building new nuclear plants, new advanced reactors in the future. Those types of plants, because they're new, have the opportunity to start out with a digital twin so that you're able to have models and measurements matching up from the beginning. So there's lots of opportunities there. But coming out of that meeting, we had the 4 innovations and also a need to focus on the culture of innovation in the industry.
Can we talk about that for a second? Because what was the state of the state? I don't think we learn about, whether it's as energy customers or just in the day-to-day discussion, there's so much about renewable energy and we don't hear about nuclear in the mix. What was the innovation scenario, right? Or what were the strategies happening prior to this meeting? Was innovation part and parcel of the discussion?
Yeah, in that time frame, certainly innovation was there. But in that time frame, there were a lot of conversations around nuclear energy in the context of plants shutting down. For example, you mentioned Indian Point being near your home.
Mm-hmm.
That particular nuclear power plant has been shut down, not for any technical reasons. So there was a lot of conversations around the cost to operate a plant. How can we become more efficient in operations, as an example? So it was very much a point of a point in time where the industry needed to start to think differently about how plants are being operated, to deploy innovations, to deploy modern technologies. Part of that has to do with attracting a workforce. There's a lot of, for example, analog systems in a nuclear power plant, and people are going to school today are really learning about the digital technology. So then they get to the plants and they say, okay, it's analog, okay, something new, something different. So it was very much a moment in time where the industry was starting to think differently about innovation. They're an example of what was happening at the time. Nuclear plants were originally licensed for 40 years of operation. And after 40 years of operation, there was some research done back probably about 20, 30 years ago that allowed the formation of a technical basis to operate for an additional 20 years. So the plants could operate for 60 years. At that point in time, in the 2018 timeframe, plants were now starting to implement the newer research that was done to operate for 20 more years. So going out to 80 years. And that to me is just a little bit of a compare and contrast to, okay, we've got a basis to operate 80 years or longer. However, we're not efficient in our operations. How do we become more efficient? And so that's where innovation was coming into play in that time frame.
Yeah. And cost has always been an issue, right? This isn't not like generating any kind of energy plant is a cheap undertaking, but certainly, and these are the constraints that every chief innovation officer in any company faces is how can I find like two more points of productivity? How can I find two more points of profitability or cost reduction that can innovate my process somehow and give us the value that we're really looking for? I mean, that's what I hear in boardrooms all day, every day.
For sure.
So why should it be any different when it comes to energy, right? But this digital twinning is really fantastic. I remember hearing first about it in biotech, and then certainly mechanical engineering, like how can we test a jet engine on a plane before we actually make that jet engine happen, right? Or we can do this in parallel to even spot deficiencies and weaknesses that might come over time. So how are you using this technology, and how did you, or any of the other innovations that you were just mentioning? And I'm kind of curious, what's the story you tell to get other people on board with these shifts?
Yeah, so let's see here. I'll probably tell a story about advanced manufacturing. So the reactor pressure vessel, which is where all the fuel is in the nuclear power plant, just think of it like a big vessel, and it is constructed in a way that one takes a long time. There's limited facilities around the world that can do this. And so some of our researchers got together with external collaborators and we're having conversations, and they started to ask what if questions, or wouldn't it be cool if? And so they came to the place and kind of said, wouldn't it be cool if we could make this in 1 year rather than 2 years or 3 years? And so one of the constraints that they have in building this vessel is the steel that's used, the material, the metal that's used. So there's a new technology called PMHIP. It stands for powder metallurgy hot isostatic press. And
sure, it's how I make a pizza. Right. Absolutely.
Right, that's why we go with PMHIP. And basically what you're doing is you're taking material in the form of almost like small pellets and putting it into a casting, raising it up to a high temperature and pressure, and you're creating the shape that you want. And it can be done in a very, very short period of time. And so they're asking the question, can we do this? Can we make this large pressure vessel in a year? And so they've gone off and with funding from the Department of Energy, with collaboration with an organization in the UK called Nuclear Advanced Manufacturing Research Center, with NuScale, they've gone off and they've kind of demonstrated the technology at this point in time. And now it's a matter of how do we take it to the next step to build a facility that's large enough to actually make the reactor pressure vessel and so on. And to me, going back to your question, it's really about telling this, the telling of the story is about creating a vision for a future that's different than it is today. It's about creating a vision for the future that solves a problem that's out there. So how can we shorten the time frame? Well, let's take a look at this. Let's put this big challenge out in front of ourselves and figure out how to solve it.
Well, it's funny. I always say that, especially as scientists, our job as innovation storytellers is to paint a picture of the future that other people can't see yet, but that in the way that we tell it, our listener must be able to see themselves in it and actually actively becoming a part of building that future together with us. So how do we tell stories, especially in this case, especially when you have this breakthrough technology that says, and guess what? You have a role to play here too. You have a part to play in this.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. That's very true. It's important to build the story with the stakeholders rather than waiting until the end and sort of informing people, oh, by the way, here's what I have. How do you like it?
Right.
Um,
And you'll do it because I said so. That's
right,
everyone's favorite, right?
right, right. And that becomes in a regulated industry like nuclear power, bringing in the United States, it would be the US nuclear regulator along the way on the journey is so much better than waiting until the end and say, hey, we have this new technology. What do you think? Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
critical. In fact, if you want to be effective as an innovator, you had better find a way to get people on board with the big idea.
Yeah,
Mm,
exactly. Exactly.
yeah.
And going back to the Global Forum for Nuclear Innovation, that was a big idea to bring the nuclear energy industry together and talk about innovation and see if we can move the dial on innovation. And the first meeting I mentioned was in 2018 and really identified the technical innovations, but also this idea around culture. And that led us to, should have been 2020, but that led us to July of 2022, having a second gathering in London.
Mm.
And these meetings it's very much an organic effort. It's very much grassroots effort. So we got together for the second time in London with a theme around culture of innovation. And the story coming out of London was one of disruption. So we opened the meeting and we had the MC kicking off the event, and very disruptively, somebody in the audience raised their hand. It was really awkward. It was really awkward. And it was a little cheesy too, because we planted the person to raise their hand. But the person in
Gosh.
the audience was asking the MC questions about nuclear energy. And then he got up, he's basically a science musician. So he got up and he rapped about nuclear energy. And everybody in the audience was quite uncomfortable
Like
because
rapping, like hip hop rapping?
yes, a version of rapping. And everybody in the audience was uncomfortable. They weren't sure what to think about it. They were disrupted. It was a little cheesy because it was planned. However, what it did is it got everybody on the same page and everybody let down, sort of opened up. It opened up people's minds to think differently, and it really opened people up to engage in a different way for the rest of the event because we had very much hands-on experiential sessions planned for the rest of the day around some of the important behaviors for an innovation mindset, like courage. You have to have the courage to speak your mind and challenge the status quo. And sometimes your idea might not look the same as the popular idea that's out there. It's going to look a little bit different. So that was one of the areas that we focused on, was sort of that challenger mindset. Diversity of thought was
Mhm.
another one where we took a look at a problem and looked at it through a feelings perspective, which might be very uncomfortable for some people. And then we looked at that same problem with what are the positives? What are the negatives? Where can we go with this? And so it really brings a different viewpoint to the situation. So we looked at courage, we looked at challenge, we looked at diversity of thought, we looked at courage as well. And it was just a great way to introduce these different mindsets, these different behaviors that are needed when it comes to innovation.
Yeah. So important, right? Especially if you want to have this to not be a one and done kind of deal, right? Shifting the culture is critical in order to get people thinking about innovation all the time, not just when a summit hits or when a crisis hits, frankly. And so one of the tools I find that smart innovators are using is empathy, is really getting really clear. Diversity of thought's really important, is like, but then how do we actually respect each other's thought processes coming from different places and different directions? Empathy, and in design thinking world, empathy mapping is a really great tool to figure out what is the actual pain that my user is going to experience, even if they say yes. If they say yes to my big idea, chances are there's still some agony circulating around the change itself. How do I get really compassionate for that person around going, wow, we really need to shift that system. We really need to stop doing it the old way that we've all mastered and give it up for something new that we don't even know if it's going to work.
Right, right. That's very, very true. Very true.
A lot of people don't enjoy coming to work every day going, I have no idea if this is going to be a giant failure.
Right.
And then putting their career and their reputation on the line to give it a shot.
Right, exactly, exactly. And I think it's the people that are around them, the leaders, if they have empathy, if they're in the mindset of a success is a failure because we've learned something from it, I think it makes it a little bit easier to come to work with, I wonder where this is gonna head.
Yeah. So I'm curious from your experience. I mean, you brought together these global organizations, most of whom didn't even talk to each other prior, right? Or didn't have an ongoing day-to-day dialogue with one another about thinking about reinventing the future of nuclear energy. Like, that's not a small thing. It's a massive undertaking. What are some of the lessons some of us can learn from bringing together a coalition like this, when typically we might not see each other necessarily as competitors, but we do want to excel in our respective domains, even if we're on different countries, different continents?
Yeah, I really think that it's that you said empathy. I think empathy is part of this as well. It's really taking a look at each other and knowing that we can learn from each other, recognizing that from the get-go. We're not in competition, we're all in this together. And that is stepping into nuclear energy. It is very much a well-connected group of individuals. And the reason that that's one of the reasons that nuclear is special. And we need to stay connected and be connected simply because of the type of work that we're in. As you mentioned earlier, 3 Mile Island, if something happens in the industry, we're all affected in some way. And so we all do work together and we collaborate together. So that is one unique characteristic that I've observed about the nuclear industry, working in this space. But when we do get together globally and we do collaborate, it really, you've got to be in the mindset of everybody's coming at this from a different perspective. There's different cultures. We're speaking different languages. We're looking at situations from different perspectives, just simply because we're individuals. And that only makes us better. And that's a plus, not a minus. It takes a little bit more effort to try to get on the same page, to try to make sure we're understanding each other. But that patience will pay off in the long run for sure.
Yeah, probably a lesson for all of us, especially when we're dealing with big working organizations and trying to get them move when so many of them prefer a glacial pace as to the one that we're trying to give them a nudge to move along a little bit more quickly. So we've come to the portion of the podcast where we put my guests a little bit on the hot seat. So let me ask you this question. In your mind, what is the greatest innovation of all time?
Well, that's a great question, and being in the work that I do, it's hard for me not to say the electric power grid. And I mentioned it earlier, to be able to turn over and flip on your light switch and know that you're going to have electricity, that is just amazing to me after having walked through a nuclear power plant, various nuclear power plants, observed wind, solar, and all the other types of generation that's out there.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. If you had the opportunity to join any innovation team in the history of human history, which team would you have wanted to join?
That's
Select to join.
Yeah, that's a tough one because there's so many great teams that are out there. And I think it would be really interesting to join a team that is at a pivotal moment. And I'll kind of step out of sort of the very technical space of the power industry and move into something more on a personal note here. So I love to cook, enjoy eating out, and love to have been part of an innovation team at a restaurant that basically pivoted. So there's 11 Madison Park in New York City that pivoted from being a restaurant focused on foods local to the state of New York, which is where I grew up, to being a plant-based restaurant. And I think it would just be fascinating to be in a kitchen to try things out and be a part of that innovation team.
Gosh, yeah, right. 11 Madison Park, especially like a Michelin-starred restaurant, right?
Right.
Convert their entire menu to vegan and seeing how that goes. Yeah, I mean, those kind of transitions are massive, right? And how our squirrely little human brains just want to stay doing the same old for a long time. And yet we still crave novelty, right? It's amazing. We crave tradition and novelty probably in equal measure.
For sure.
And my last question is, what's something that you wish were invented, or something that really annoys you that you'd love to see somebody fix?
That's a great one as well. In my immediate sort of world that I'm living in right now, and something that I'm really passionate about is trying to come up with the sort of the easy button to be able to get conversations about energy more broadly into the school systems.
Mm. Wow. And so what do you wish kids would know that they don't know right now?
I've got two in high school at the moment, so I'm seeing what they're learning in their classes, which is fantastic. I wish that there were more opportunities for them to have exposure to energy and what a career in energy would be like. There's a club, DECA, that's focused in the business area. So why
I was
not?
in DECA and junior achievement. Yep, absolutely.
So why not have a club like that that's focused around energy?
Ooh. All right, kiddos, strap yourselves in because mom's coming for career day to tell you everything you wanted to know about nuclear energy. Get ready. Well, Heather Feldman, thank you so much for joining me on the show. If people want to get in touch and learn more about the innovative work that you're doing, what's the best way to reach you?
The best way to get in touch with me is on LinkedIn. You can find me at Heather Feldman.
Fantastic. Heather, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much, Susan. This was great.